The topography didn't just disagree with the map, it mocked it. Elias Thorne stood on the ridge, the biting Appalachian wind cutting through his heavy canvas jacket. He looked down at the GPS unit in his gloved hand, then back up at the dense grayscale tangle of the basin below. The device claimed he was standing on a flat plateau at 2,000 feet. His eyes told him he was perched on the lip of a jagged, precipitous drop into a valley that looked like a wound in the earth. He wasn't supposed to be here. This was off-grid work, a private contracting gig for a shell company interested in soil liquefaction potential. The pay was triple the industry standard, wired up front. The only stipulation was a non-disclosure agreement thick enough to choke a horse, and a singular cryptic instruction: do not rely on satellite imaging, verify on foot. The locals in the rusted-out town of Oakhaven, 10 miles back, hadn't wanted to talk about Silas Creek. The waitress at the diner had just poured his coffee, looked at his boots, and whispered, "Dirt don't stay put down there, honey. You best watch your step." Elias adjusted the straps of his pack. He was a man of science, of granite and shale, of yield rates and shear strength. He didn't believe in folklore. He believed in geology. But as he descended the scree slope, sliding on loose slate that chattered like broken teeth, the silence of the valley hit him. It wasn't the quiet of a forest. A forest is never truly quiet. There is always the rustle of rodents, the call of a jay, the hum of insects. This silence was heavy, pressurized. It felt like the air inside a sealed tomb. He reached the valley floor around 4 p.m. The light was already failing, the sun choked out by the high, jagged walls of the ridge. He set up his initial camp near a dried-up stream bed. As he hammered the tent stakes into the soil, the ground felt spongy, not muddy, elastic, like driving a nail into a piece of wet meat. He paused, the hammer raised. He waited. Nothing, just the wind high above, sounding like a distant ocean. He shook his head, blaming the fatigue of the hike. He unpacked his theodolite and laser rangefinder. He needed baseline coordinates before dark. He set the tripod on a flat rock and sighted a massive lightning-struck oak tree across the clearing. Distance 45.2 meters, elevation neutral. He noted it in his waterproof field journal. Objective 1, establish perimeter. He turned away to grab a protein bar from his pack. When he turned back, a frown creased his weathered face. The tripod looked lower. He stepped back to the viewfinder. The crosshairs were no longer centered on the oak tree's trunk. They were aiming 3 feet to the left, into the empty brush. Elias checked the legs of the tripod, rock solid. He checked the ground. No slippage. He looked at the tree. It stood there, ancient and black against the gray sky. It hadn't moved. Trees don't move. Parallax, he muttered, though he knew it wasn't. Just the light playing tricks. He recalibrated. 45.2 meters. He locked the gears down tight. As he zipped his tent for the night, the temperature plummeted. The fog began to roll in, not from the sky, but seeping up from the soil itself, smelling faintly of copper and old stagnant water. Elias lay in his sleeping bag, listening. At 2 a.m. he heard it. It started low, a rhythmic whoosh and release, too slow for a machine, too loud for an animal. It spanned the entire width of the valley. Inhale. Pause for 4 seconds. Exhale. The valley wasn't just windy. Silas Creek was breathing. Morning brought no sunlight, only a lighter shade of gray. The fog hung in thick ribbons, waist-high, obscuring the ground so that walking felt like wading through milk. Elias boiled water on his portable stove, the hiss of the gas burner the only man-made sound in the world. He felt groggy, a dull headache throbbing behind his eyes. The air here was too rich, or maybe too thin. It tasted metallic. He packed his gear and moved to the second checkpoint. His job was to grid the basin, checking for tectonic instability. The mining company wanted to blast the ridge, but they needed to know if the floor would hold. He walked 500 paces north, checking his compass. The needle jittered, not a wild spin, but a nervous tick, trembling between north and north-northeast. Magnetic deposits, he reasoned. Iron ore. He reached the spot marked for the second survey. According to the topographical maps from 1985, the only ones that acknowledged this place existed, there should have been a limestone outcrop here. There was nothing but a dense thicket of rhododendrons. Elias pushed through the tough, waxy leaves, the branches snagging his jacket. He found the outcrop 50 yards east. "Drift," he whispered. "Map's wrong." He set up the equipment again. As he worked, he couldn't shake the sensation of being observed. It wasn't the feeling of a predator watching prey. It was more clinical, like a specimen under a microscope. He knelt to take a soil sample, driving a core tube into the loam. When he pulled it out, the earth made a sucking sound, a wet thwack that sounded obscene in the quiet. He capped the tube and looked at the strata layers through the clear plastic. Topsoil, clay, then something black and viscous. It wasn't oil. He uncapped the tube and touched it. It was warm. Elias wiped his hand on his pants, a shudder running through him. Geothermal activity, he told himself. That explains the warmth. That explains the shifting ground. He moved deeper into the woods. The trees here were wrong, their trunks twisted in spirals, as if they had been wrung out like wet towels while they were saplings. And they were leaning, all of them. They were leaning toward him. He stopped. He looked back the way he came.
The path he had trampled through the rhododendrons was gone. The bushes had sprung back, knitting themselves together into a solid wall of green. "Okay," Elias said aloud. His voice sounded dead, swallowed instantly by the moss. "Okay, that's enough." He checked his GPS. No signal. He checked his radio. Static, but not white noise. Beneath the crackle, there was a rhythm. Inhale, exhale. He turned off the radio. He needed a landmark. He looked for the lightning-struck oak from yesterday. It should have been visible from this elevation. He scanned the tree line. There it was, but it was closer, much closer. Yesterday, it was at the southern edge of the clearing. Now it stood in the center, its blackened limbs reaching up like charred skeletal fingers. Elias felt a cold sweat prickle his hairline. He grabbed his laser rangefinder. Distance, 20.0 meters. Yesterday, it was 45. He hadn't moved camp. The tree had moved, or the ground between them had been swallowed. He packed his gear with frantic, jerky movements. He needed to get to higher ground. He needed to see the shape of this place. As he slung his pack over his shoulder, he saw something half buried in the mud near his boot. It was a lantern, old, rusted through, the glass globe shattered. He kicked it loose. It was a Coleman model from the 70s. He crouched down. Beside the lantern, something white poked out of the dirt. He dug it out with his knife. It was a plastic ID badge, yellowed and cracked. The photo was bleached away by time and moisture, but the name was barely legible. M. Vance, Site Surveyor, 1974. Elias stared at the badge. There were no records of a 1974 survey. The company had told him this land was untouched. He flipped the badge over. Scratched into the plastic on the back, in jagged, frantic carving, were 3 words. "It knows weight."
Elias pocketed the badge. The phrase repeated in his mind, syncing with the rhythm of his own heavy breathing. It knows weight. It knows weight. He pushed north, aiming for the ridgeline. He had to verify the boundary markers. If the valley was geologically unstable, sliding downhill, that would explain the movement. It was a landslide in slow motion. That was the logical answer. But logic was beginning to fray. As he walked, the forest floor felt less like solid ground and more like a membrane. Steps that should have been firm sank inches deep. Steps that should have sunk found resistance where there was none. He felt like he was walking on the chest of a sleeping giant. He found the cabin around noon. It wasn't on any map. It was a small structure, half swallowed by the hill. The earth had flowed over the roof like a slow wave, covering the shingles in moss and saplings. The front door hung off one hinge. Elias drew his bear spray, a pathetic defense against whatever this was, and stepped inside. The air inside was musty, smelling of rot and wet paper. A table sat in the center, untouched. A metal chair was overturned. On the table sat a reel-to-reel tape recorder, the kind used in the mid-70s. Beside it lay a pile of tapes, their ribbons unspooled and tangled like black spaghetti. Elias touched the machine. It still had batteries inside, corroded and leaking acid, but one tape was still threaded. He pulled a fresh set of batteries from his headlamp, cleaned the contacts as best he could, and slotted them in. He hit play. A burst of static filled the cabin, making him jump. Then a voice, a man's voice, shaky, terrified. Day 4 or 5. The sun I haven't seen the sun. Vance is gone. The ground took him. He was standing by the creek, and then he was waist deep, screaming that it was burning him. I couldn't pull him out. The mud, it pulled back, like a muscle. Click. Silence. Then the voice returned, whispering, "It's not haunted. Ghosts are dead. This is biology. The whole valley. It's an organ, a stomach. It's digesting us. It learns the pattern of your walk. It learns how heavy you are. If you stop moving, it starts to eat. If you keep moving, it herds you." Elias hit stop. His hand was shaking. "It herds you." He looked out the dirty window. The trees outside seemed taller than before, closer. The path he had walked to get to the cabin was gone, replaced by a dense wall of briars. The door was the only way out, and the door faced the center of the hollow. He grabbed the tape recorder, shoved it into his pack, and ran. Panic is a chemist. It floods the brain with cortisol, sharpening the senses while dulling reason. Elias ran until his lungs burned, his boots pounding the soft, yielding earth. He needed to get back to the ridge. He checked his compass. The needle was spinning lazily in a circle. Useless. He checked his GPS. The screen simply read, calculating. He stopped to catch his breath, leaning against a large boulder. He looked down at the ground to check his footing. There were footprints in the mud, fresh ones. He froze. He hadn't heard anyone. He knelt to examine them. They were boot prints, size 11, vibram sole, heavy tread. He looked at his own boots, size 11, vibram sole. He placed his foot next to the print. It was a match. "I'm walking in circles," he wheezed. "I just looped back." But he looked closer. The print in the mud had a distinctive nick in the heel, a triangular cut where he had stepped on a sharp piece of slate 3 years ago. He checked his own boot. The nick was there. Okay, circles, just circles. He followed the tracks backward with his eyes.
They came from the north. He had just come from the south. He looked forward. The tracks continued ahead of him. "No," he whispered. He started walking, stepping beside the tracks. He followed them for 10 minutes. The stride length was exactly his. The depth of the impression was exactly his. But these tracks were made before he got here. He came to a small clearing he had never seen before. In the center lay a granola bar wrapper. Elias reached into his pocket. His granola bar was still there, sealed. He looked at the wrapper on the ground. It was the same brand, the same flavor. He dropped his pack. He unzipped it and tore through his supplies. He counted his rations. He had 6 bars left. He hadn't eaten one yet today. So whose wrapper was that? The realization hit him like a physical blow. The valley wasn't just copying the terrain. It was extrapolating. It was predicting. It was creating a simulation of him, running it ahead of him to see what he would do. He was walking his own ghost.
Night fell with the suddenness of a guillotine. One moment it was dusk, the next absolute, suffocating blackness. Elias didn't set up the tent. He was afraid that if he zipped himself inside, he would wake up buried. He sat against the boulder, his headlamp cutting a cone of light through the fog. The breathing was louder tonight. Inhale, the ground beneath him rose an inch. Exhale, it sank. It was synchronized with the fog. When the ground inhaled, the fog pulled back. When it exhaled, the white mist poured over him, cold and smelling of old meat. He was sitting on a lung. He took out the tape recorder again. He needed to hear a human voice, even if it was a dead man's. Don't sleep. That's when it works fastest. It takes the things you don't need first, your keys, your memories of home. Then it takes your fingers, then your face. It wants the geometry of you. It wants to know how to be you. Elias looked at his hands. They looked pale in the LED light. The dirt under his fingernails was dark black. He tried to remember the face of his contact at the mining company, a blur. He tried to remember the drive to Oak Haven. He remembered the road, but not the car. "Stop it," he hissed. "Shock. It's just shock." He stood up. He couldn't stay still. It knows weight. If he stayed still, he became part of the landscape. He had to keep moving. Variable weight, variable pressure. He began to walk in the dark. The trees were moving more aggressively now. He could hear the wood groaning, the roots tearing through the soil with the sound of ripping canvas. They were repositioning, blocking his path, funneling him. He aimed his light to the left, a wall of trees. He aimed to the right, a cliff face that hadn't been there yesterday. The valley was a maze, and the walls were closing in. He saw a light ahead, a faint orange glow. Hope surged through him. A campfire? Another surveyor? He ran toward it, stumbling over roots that seemed to grab at his ankles. "Hey! Help!"
He burst into the clearing. The light wasn't a fire. It was his own headlamp. It was sitting on a rock, shining into the fog, and standing next to it, facing away from him, was a man. The man wore a heavy canvas jacket. He wore size 11 boots. He had a pack slung over one shoulder. Elias stopped, his breath catching in his throat. "Hey?" he croaked. The figure didn't turn, but it spoke. "Distance, 20.0 meters, the figure said. It was Elias's voice, perfect pitch, perfect cadence. "Who are you?" Elias screamed. The figure turned slowly. Where the face should have been, there was only smooth, wet shale. No eyes, no mouth, just the gray, rocky surface of the hollow, molded into the shape of a human head. The shale cracked open where a mouth should be. "Terrain unstable," the thing said. Elias turned and ran into the dark.
He ran until he couldn't run. He scrambled up a slope, clawing at the mud, his fingernails tearing. The earth felt warm against his chest. It pulsed. He reached a high point, a rocky spur overlooking the basin. He collapsed there, gasping. He looked down at the valley. The fog had cleared for a moment. The moon, a sliver of pale light, broke through the clouds. The valley floor was moving, not just the trees. The ground itself was rolling, undulating like the surface of a disturbed lake. Hills were rising and collapsing. The riverbed was snaking sideways like a serpent. It was a digestive tract. It was churning. Elias checked his body. His jacket was torn. His left boot was missing. He didn't remember losing it. He looked at his foot. The sock was gone. His skin was gray, not pale, gray like the slate. He touched his foot. He couldn't feel his fingers on his skin. The nerve endings were dead, or rather, they were changing. He was calcifying. "No!" he sobbed. He scrambled back, trying to get away from the edge. He grabbed the radio. "Mayday! Mayday! Can anyone hear me?" Static, then a click. "Elias?" It was the mining company contact, or it sounded like him. Yes, this is Thorn. I'm trapped in the basin. The geography is shifting. I need extraction." "Please verify coordinates," the voice said, calm, bureaucratic. "I can't. The coordinates change every minute. Just track my signal." "Signal verified," the voice said. "Terrain stable. Survey complete." "What? No, it's not stable. It's alive." "Thank you, Elias. The data is excellent. We have fully mapped the absorption rates." "Absorption?" Elias froze. "The hollow requires biomass to maintain stability. Your mass has been accepted." "You knew. You sent me here to feed it." "Do not struggle. It ruins the topography." The radio went dead. Elias threw the radio into the void. He sat on the rock. He was cold, but the cold felt distant, as if it were happening to someone else. He looked at his hands. The gray was spreading up his wrists. His skin was turning hard, rough, flaking off in chips of stone. He understood now. The other surveyor, Vance, he hadn't vanished. He was part of the geography. That rock he sat on, maybe that was Vance. That tree blocking his path, maybe that was the surveyor before him. The hollow didn't just kill you, it used you. It needed new material to keep building its maze. He felt a heaviness in his chest. His breathing was slowing down. It was sinking. Inhale, the valley expanded. Inhale, Elias's chest expanded. Exhale, the valley contracted. Exhale, Elias's chest fell. He was losing the boundary between himself and the place. He reached for his journal. He had to leave a record, something that couldn't be absorbed. He took out his pen. He tried to write, but his fingers were stiff, fusing together. He managed to scrawl one final entry. The map is a lie. The ground is hungry. I am the mountain now. He shoved the journal into a crevice deep in the granite rock of the spur. Hopefully, the rock was real rock, not mimic flesh. He stood up. He had one choice left. If he stayed here, he would become stone, a statue on the ridge. If he went down, he would be digested. But maybe if he gave it what it wanted, he could push back. He looked at the doppelganger down in the clearing, the thing with the shale face. It was looking up at him, waiting. Elias laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound. "You want weight?" he yelled. "I'll give you weight." He didn't climb down. He jumped. He fell for what felt like a long time. He hit the ground, but there was no bone-shattering crunch. The earth caught him. It was soft, wet, and enveloping. He sank immediately. The mud rushed over his face, into his mouth, into his nose. It tasted of iron and memories. He felt the pressure on all sides. He was being swallowed. But he fought. He didn't fight to escape. He fought to destroy. He kicked with his stone-hard foot. He clawed with his petrified hands. He tore at the meat of the earth. He felt the valley shudder. A seismic tremor ripped through the soil. He heard a sound, a low, agonizing groan that vibrated through his bones. It was hurting it. He dug deeper, swimming through the soil. He was looking for the heart or the stomach, whatever powered this thing. He found a root system, but they weren't wood. They were veins, thick, pulsing veins of black fluid. Elias grabbed one with both hands and squeezed. The scream was deafening. It wasn't a sound. It was a psychic blast. Get out. The earth convulsed. Elias was thrown upward. The ground vomited him out.
he flew through the air, crashing through branches, tumbling down the scree slope, bouncing off rocks. He rolled and rolled until he hit asphalt.
He lay on the road, the hard, cold, unmoving asphalt of the old county highway. Rain fell on his face, real rain, clean rain. He gasped, coughing up black bile. A truck's headlights swept over him. Tires screeched. A door slammed. "Buddy! Holy hell, are you okay?" A trucker was standing over him. Elias tried to speak. "The hollow?" "You look like you went through a wood chipper, man. What happened? You from the mining site?" Elias looked at his hands. They were pink, flesh, bruised and bloody, but flesh. He looked at his feet. Both boots were gone. His feet were shredded, raw meat. Elias couldn't remember his name. He reached into his pocket. The tape recorder was gone. The ID badge was gone. But he felt something else. He pulled it out. It was a small stone, smooth, gray shale. It was warm, and as he held it in his palm, he felt it. Pulse. Pulse. He dropped it. "Get away from it," he whispered. "What?" the trucker asked. "The stone. Don't touch it." The trucker looked at the rock, then back at Elias with pity. "All right, pal. Let's get you to a hospital." Part 10. Terrain stable. 3 months later. The report sat on the desk of the senior vice president of TerraCore Mining. File 89 Alpha. Subject: Gideon's Basin Stability Assessment. Surveyor: redacted. Status: approved. The VP flipped through the pages. The data was immaculate. Soil density perfect. Bedrock stability at 98%. It was the perfect site for the new extraction plant. "He never came in for his final check, did he, Secretary?" "No, sir. They found him wandering the highway. Amnesia, severe dehydration. He's in a state facility now. Doesn't speak much." "But he mailed the data?" "Yes, sir. Along with this." She handed him a small box. The VP opened it. Inside was a jagged piece of gray slate. He picked it up. It felt heavy for its size. "Weird," he muttered. "It's warm." He set the stone on his desk, next to the framed picture of his family. "All right, green light the excavation. Send the heavy drills in on Monday." He turned back to his computer. Behind him, on the desk, the stone shifted just an inch. The VP didn't hear it. The hum of the air conditioner covered the sound. But if he had leaned close, if he had pressed his ear against the gray stone, he would have heard it. A tiny rhythmic sound. Inhale. Exhale. The hollow had been verified. The hollow had been fed. And now the hollow was coming home.